Assassin's Creed was my favorite franchise in any form of media ever growing up. I played through the first 4 games more times than I can count and plan on continuing to do so in the foreseeable future. I love the games that much. I mention that to say that I don't want to hate Assassin's Creed. I very much go into these games wanting to love them. This was especially the case with Assassin's Creed Valhalla. After Odyssey released, I needed that 1-year gap to sort of give my mind a break from the franchise. Odyssey did not feel like an Assassin's Creed game whatsoever in my eyes. No assassins or Templars, no emphasis on parkour, a weak modern day plot, no social stealth, nothing resembling Assassin's Creed at all. There was nothing to sink my teeth into as a fan. To make these things worse, the game also retconned established lore. Odyssey was a game that made me think, Ubisoft doesn't respect their hardcore fan base anymore. It seemed like they were more interested in chasing dollar signs and leeching off the hype and ideas of other popular games, when Assassin's Creed used to be a franchise that other games wanted to copy, when Assassin's Creed had an identity. So once Valhalla was announced, I'll admit I was pretty hyped. It seemed as if Ubisoft was finally paying attention to what the hardcore fans were begging for since the formula change in Origin. They marketed the return of social stealth. We were told assassins were an important cog of the story, and we were told that the modern day will be a focus again. The Ubisoft Montreal team was also making this game, who also made Black Flag and Origins, 2 of their recent games that I probably loved the most. And on top of that, Darby McDevitt was the narrative director of Valhalla, who also wrote Black Flag and Revelations, 2 of the best written games in the entire franchise. Even Jesper Kyd was returning to help with the soundtrack. This game seemed like the perfect mix of the right people coming together to bring back the series I used to love more than anything else. So did it deliver? Yes, but mostly no. Valhalla is a complicated game to critique among the purist AC fans, which I consider myself as. Before I get into what the game did right or wrong, let me clarify what I personally call the pillars of identity of Assassin's Creed in order of importance. The first and most important thing I want is a story that revolves around and emphasizes the conflict between assassins and Templars. Second is the pillars of gameplay that gave Assassin's Creed its identity. This would be the social stealth and parkour. Third is a modern day plot that gives us a reason for going in the Animus and exploring history. In my eyes, if an Assassin's Creed game doesn't have all 3 of these things, it's not fully capitalizing on the franchise's identity. Now let's put Valhalla up to the test and see if it accomplishes anything on the list. Number 1. Does it tell a story of the conflict between the assassins and Templars? No, it doesn't. You could take everything that has to do with the Hidden Ones and Order of the Ancients out of the game, and the story would still pretty much be the same. There isn't even a conflict with the Order in the main plot. You may kill a few members, but that's not Eivor's main goal. You can even complete the game without confronting the Grandmaster of the Order. The story is more interested in telling a Viking saga. The Hidden Ones are treated like a dirty secret that the game is ashamed to mention. Even the side assassin activities don't feel interesting because Eivor doesn't acknowledge anything you discover at all. She simply doesn't care. Reading the Codex, learning about Amunet, and hearing Bayek's letter means nothing to Eivor because she has no interest in the Hidden Ones. These things mean more to the Assassin's Creed Wikipedia and the player more than Eivor, so it causes a disconnect, which is not a good thing to feel with the protagonist of a video game. To make things even worse, Eivor is offered a chance to join the Hidden Ones at the end of the game, and she outright refuses. So this is the second game in a row where you play as a character who has nothing to do with the assassins. An argument that people like to bring up against this is that she might join the Hidden Ones in the DLC, but that doesn't really fix the issue, it honestly makes it worse. Ubisoft marketed this game as a return to form in that assassins would be very involved in the story, and we got that for about the first 2 hours of the game, and then rarely ever again. If the game pushed an assassin-centric narrative to a DLC that you have to pay for is a spit in the face after already spending $60 on the base game. Now I don't want people to get confused. I think Valhalla is an excellently written game that invests me. I don't think the story of Valhalla is bad in any way whatsoever. I have a problem with the direction that the story takes as an Assassin's Creed story. Another argument people like to bring up against this is that you don't play as an assassin in Black Flag either, so why don't you complain about that? This isn't exactly an apples to apples comparison. In Black Flag, Edward's journey ends up intertwining with the assassins in a way that makes sense. He goes through an arc where he starts as this selfish pirate, only looking for personal glory, and ends up learning and adopting the creed to better himself as a character and becomes a selfless person instead. In Valhalla, Eivor starts as a character that wants personal glory, and that never changes at the end. She refused to join the Hidden Ones because she wanted to be the face of her accomplishment. The focus of the creed and how it applies to Edward's character is the difference between him and Eivor. Number 2. Does the gameplay feature the elements that give Assassin's Creed its identity? Valhalla sort of does this, but in the most frustrating and unsatisfying way possible. Social stealth made a return after not showing up since Syndicate, but it feels like it was just slapped into the game with no proper development or care. You can only blend in with specific groups, similar to the way that you could in Assassin's Creed 1, but these opportunities are rarely useful, if ever. It feels clunky to utilize, and you're better off just using the obvious paths to climb that's always like 5 feet away from you. The distress areas was a really cool idea that just feels like wasted potential. These are areas where if you make yourself stand out among the crowd, the guards could recognize and attack you, but it doesn't feel well thought out. The enemies are always in predictable places like guarding churches or fields, but there are rarely any patrolling guards that force you to hide or use these social stealth features. When there are patrolling guards, they detect you so fast or attack without even investigating. The AI is so broken that they even attack you at times without seeing you. Distress areas could have used some more time in the oven, and if properly implemented, would have been one of the coolest features that even the Ezio trilogy didn't accomplish. And I've already mentioned it, but something about the detection AI during stealth is just flat out broken. You get detected when enemies aren't even looking at you or through walls. It's like the game is very much pushing you to embrace the Viking playstyle and go in every situation swords blazing. And that brings us to the worst offender of the gameplay, the parkour. Assassin's Creed used to be a game with some of the most satisfying parkour in video games ever. Whether you preferred the Ezio trilogy style parkour or the Unity style parkour, there was at least a level of satisfaction you could get from it that was engaging and something you could learn to master with enough practice. There are new moves I still learn to this day after a decade of playing these games. In Valhalla, well, since Origins really, but it feels even worse in Valhalla for some reason, the parkour is mind-numbingly simple and there's no way to apply skill to the parkour. It's always hold forward and press the climb button when necessary. There's nothing engaging about it at all. You don't have to look for a path on a structure you're trying to climb because you can climb on anything. This is different than in the older games where it was possible to fail at parkour. Whether it was a wrong button press or jumping in the wrong direction, you needed to pay attention to what you were doing. And to add on to that, the animations are so slow to the point where it's faster to just simply run to your destination than use parkour to speed up the process. This is especially apparent when you're chasing the tattoo pages. It got to the point where I would chase the page once and see where the end of the trail is, and then run straight to the end point and wait for the page to come to me on my second attempt. That's how unengaging the parkour is in Valhalla. Number 3. Is there a modern day plot that gives us a reason for exploring history? This is probably where Valhalla succeeds the most. The modern day plot has been horrible ever since Unity, and Valhalla is the first time it does something interesting at the very least. There is a clear-cut plot, and you understand why you are exploring Eivor's memories from the beginning. There are optional dialogues you can listen to, and things in the computer that adds much needed depth to Layla's character, and even previous characters in the series. There are things in the modern day that are some of the best written stuff in the game, and I don't say that lightly. It ties up some plot lines and answers some questions that haven't been answered since Brotherhood, and it doesn't feel tacked on. The modern day plotline is always what made me a diehard fan of the Assassin's Creed franchise, so I can appreciate that Valhalla gives me something to sink my teeth into and discuss. Overall, Valhalla only really accomplishes one out of the 3 pillars of identity that would make me consider it an Assassin's Creed game. And if the way Ubisoft is treating the post-launch content for Valhalla is any indicator, they don't care about truly returning to form with the things that made me a fan of the franchise in the first place. They care more about chasing trends and becoming a fantasy RPG game at the cost of the franchise's identity. I don't feel respected. As a longtime fan of Assassin's Creed, it seems as if Ubisoft stopped caring and moved on. Maybe it's a sign that I should stop caring and move on as well.